Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. We're starting a new subject this week. Here's the cover of a book from 2019, High Weirdness, Drugs, Esoterica, and Visionary Experience in the 70s. And this is by Eric Davis, a cultural critic, but also someone very interested in philosophy and religion, mostly alternative philosophy and religion. It's a very good book if you're interested in the California scene, and especially in the sci-fi world of the 1970s that still affects things very much today. And this week, what I want to be talking about in that line is loving the synchrony. Synchrony has a lot of different meanings, but it's very specific in religion. And that's what we're going to be looking at this week. The book's description is an exploration of the emergence of a new psychedelic spirituality in the work of Philip K. Dick, Terence McKenna, and Robert Anton Wilson. If you're not a sci-fi fan, you may not know most of these names, but Philip K. Dick, of course, the mastermind behind The Matrix, and also a recent TV miniseries called The Man in the High Castle. Very much into alternative visions of how reality worked. And the book discusses how this has affected American society, popular culture, but also more serious religious inquiries. So synchrony. In religious terms, because there are various kinds of synchrony, it exhibits blending of two or more religious belief systems into a new system, or the incorporation into a religious tradition of beliefs from unrelated traditions. So you're putting at least one other religion besides your own, if you've got one, into a blender and hitting go and chopping them up into something new. Now, in some ways, this can be something as simple as traditional Christians kind of thinking that maybe karma is something out there, makes sense to them, something like that. But it can also go into more radical ways of re-seeing reality, as the book and with the sci-fi authors discuss, which we'll get back to in a moment. So one question I want to ask this week is, in our networked world, is pure religion even possible? Can you be someone who keeps up with American popular culture and not run into a religion besides, say, your Presbyterian roots? That's one question. Another question, can everything be described by observation and the scientific method? Or is there something else, not only the not yet known, but the can't be known? And of course, this is a central question. As a matter of fact, I think it's much more important as a question than the old theism-atheism divide, because in this one, in this formulation, we're really thinking about some kind of consciousness that is not human, right? Beyond human. Is that possible? Maybe it would be called God, might be called any number of other things. And can only be known in alternative ways. That is, only through some sort of mystical thing can real reality be known, which many people do believe. So, for example, Rice University, which has one of the premier religious studies programs in the United States, has a program called Gnosticism, Esotericism, and Mysticism. The Department of Religion offers a certificate. You can get it and hang it on your wall. Gnosticism, Esotericism, and Mysticism, affectionately known as GEM. All right, so here's the course description for that. Traditionally, the study of religion has privileged the authoritative voices of the religious experts and the scriptural that uphold orthodox traditions. GEM is a new approach, the study of religion, that does not privilege the public orthodox framings, but takes seriously the heterodox and esoteric currents that have been actively repressed, censored, marginalized in a variety of sociological, psychological, philosophical, and political ways. GEM takes into account the plurality of religious voices and expressions, including the neglected currents, in order to reconceive religion. This approach also engages the psychology and the phenomenology of religious experience rather than relying exclusively on the authorial framings taught by the faith traditions and transmitted in their scriptural texts, interpretations, and rituals. Yes, it does sound like a college course, doesn't it? But you see where they're going with this and why science fiction does play a part. As a matter of fact, one of the professors in the program is Jeffrey Kripal, a very well-known religious studies theorist. And one of his books is Mutants and Mystics, Science Fiction, Superhero Comics, and the Paranormal. So again, looking at ways that people are actually religious rather than ways people are supposed to be religious in some kind of traditional ways. And yes, a synchrony, people throwing in various things into that mixer and coming up with their very own subjective religion. So is there a there? In psychology and religious studies, the affective turn has begun to study embodied cognition. This is a brand new field, really. Only a few books, a handful of books are out about it. But that is looking at the emotions as how they affect the human mind rather than just reason. So a recent book, The Emotional Mind, The Affective Roots of Culture and Cognition. And of course, what that has to do with religion, because religions are the oldest psychological methods for human beings dealing with reality, right? So the affective turn. And as I mentioned, this also, he co-authored the other book, but Stephen T. Asma, who's a professor at Columbia University in Chicago in philosophy and religion, and a new book called Why We Need Religion. And his answer is probably not what you think it is. Why you need religion, because Dr. Asma is an agnostic atheist and a completely naturalistic materialist philosopher. So why does he think we need religion when he doesn't believe in any of it anyway? And that's a very good question, and it has to do with the affective turn. And of course, in Unitarian Universalism, we do have this thing called the fourth principle of the seven principles, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And so is truth and meaning responsibly in such things as sci-fi writing. Good question, and you can get a certificate in asking that question at Rice University. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week, is how we throw religious ideas into a blender and come up with our own subjective realities and explanations for reality. Wednesday night at 7, speaking of new ideas, Paul will meet the Greek philosophers, a very famous passage from the book of Acts, and we'll talk about what it really says, because it's not completely clear until you dig under it a little bit, who is being talked to, who is speaking, and why, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll look at a little background on this very interesting meeting of Greek philosophy and the Apostle Paul with his brand new, spanking new religion there. And that'll be 7 o'clock Central Time on Wednesday evening. You can find lots of stuff about FUS, First Unitarian Society, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can help us out on PayPal or by going to firstunitarian.org/donate. And we'll be talking more about this religious blender tomorrow. Thank you.